The 3rd hour of the 9th day, 11 months and 220 years after the fall of Ustilia. Now Thacia too is fallen. Alaric von Bella is dead. He failed in his duties, blinded by mortal pride. All that remains of the Grand Inquisitor's legacy is myself, and though I bear his name, I am not the same man. I am no man at all. The last of my humanity was stripped from me as I plunged the needle into my vein and delivered the curse of undeath unto my own flesh. Its touch was molten lead, surging up my arm and into my chest. Yet even as my heart strangled on the cursed blood, its flow was unhindered. It seeped through the rest of me on its own power, searing blood vessels that spasmed at its passage. It devoured me from within, every drop of me that was human, until only the inhuman remained. I writhed in torment, unable to scream for lungs that drowned in roiling blood, seizing, convulsing, maddeningly aware of every second, each as long as a turning of seasons. Then I saw her, briefly, pale as the moon that lit her, stood atop a temple wreathed in flame. And then there was only darkness. Death settled upon me, draped me in its shadowed wings, but it could not bear me from this world. For that which I had spent most of my life hunting, I had now become. The sounds of the city came to me then, as they never had in life. A cacophony of fevered battle. The timbers of houses groaned as they were consumed by flame. Voices of the dead, of great trees long felled, straining, snapping, splitting. Steel upon steel. Desperate cries, hopeless clashes ringing in the streets, only to be drowned by the twisted veiling of those that walked in the guise of man. Those with eyes that brimmed with blood and long, slanted smiles. Then came the bells, the mighty bells, the voice of Thacia herself crying out in defiance, echoing across history. With the last of their tolls did I rise from my ruin and stand anew, Alaric the Damned. For a time, I simply stood there, paralyzed by the realization that I had succeeded in my final experiment, by the horror of what that meant. Could it have been an illusion? The twisted dream of a dying mind? I looked upon my hands, pallid and cold, pressed them to my face, to flesh that was stiff and without warmth. I soon realized that it was not by any physiological process that I moved. No contraction or release of muscle fiber. It was the blood within me, no longer human. Simply by thinking of the movement I intended, the blood would leap within, compelling my dead limbs to obey. I reached into my coat and clutched my chest. No rhythm stirred beneath, neither pulse nor breath. I gasped in startlement, felt the air rush into me, held it there. I waited, but there came no urgency, no burning need to release the breath. I suppose I could have held it indefinitely, but it was such an unsettling sensation that I refused. Even more unsettling was the fact that if I did not consciously make the effort to breathe, my body no longer performs a process by reflex. This was no dream. I was devoid of life, and yet my consciousness persisted. Perhaps I could say my soul persisted, but I doubt it. As much as I wished to remain in my laboratory to experiment further upon my condition, I knew that I had to flee the city. It was only a matter of time before the awakened returned. I glanced down at the wounds they had given me, but it was gone. Not even a scar left in its place. Out of habit, I went to retrieve my satchel, but as I approached, my steps faltered. The blood in my legs rebelled. I would have been wiser to heed its warning, but much of what I was still clings to me. The need to understand. With great effort, I was able to reach with trembling hand and unfasten the satchel. A terrible light poured out, burning the nerves that ran behind my eyes. The blood turned me away, compelled me to flee, but I forced myself to look again. I realized then that the satchel was lost to me. The light shone from an emblem, an open hand with an eye on its palm, the badge of an Inquisitor. It was made of silver. No more badges, no more tools, only the blood. The blood. There was still so much in the vat where I was cultivating it. It seemed too dangerous a thing to be left there, yet once again, as I approached, I felt the blood inside recoil. Then I saw and remembered the ring of salt I had placed around the vat. This time, I listened to the blood and drew no closer. Instead, I opened the cabinet that contained my crossbow, loaded with damnable silver bolts. I slammed the cabinet shut. In retrospect, I could have found a way to break the vat, thrown something at it perhaps, but I heard footsteps fall elsewhere in my estate. They were coming. While moving above ground would have been the fastest way to escape the city, it would mean direct confrontation with the awakened, and I had no crossbow, no satchel, no tools, nor did I know their capabilities. I turned instead to the sewers. Out of habit, I struck a torch, but the flame glared overbright. It gave no pain as the silver light did, but neither did it aid my sight, and so I doused it. But the sewers were not dark this time. They were filled with grayish light that came from nowhere and everywhere. The stream of human waste squelched and burbled in visceral clarity, and though I could have chosen not to breathe, I found that prospect more disturbing than the greasy warmth that struck my nostrils and slid down the back of my throat. The scurrying of rats came to me from a distance, their squeaking breaths so clear that I could seek them out by sound alone. And further still, the chitinous legs of roaches skittered and swarmed. But there was one thing I did not hear as I moved among the creatures of the dark, for no sound came at all from my own steps. I knew the way through the winding tunnels. There were several escape routes in case of siege. I followed the ones that would place me furthest from the city. As I walked, I could not shake the haunting thoughts. I am dead. I am as cold as the stone upon which I tread. Shall I decay? Shall I remain locked inside a corpse, forced to watch it molder and putrefy, to feel my flesh rotting from its bones? I had never observed a vampire closely, never learned how time affects them. Whatever fate awaited me was a morbid secret, and though death stilled my heart, it could not still my dread. Something drew me from my terrible thoughts upon the arcing walls and ceilings of the tunnels, a sight unseen in all my life. A visceral film coated the stones of the sewers, a kind of growth. As I stopped to examine the wall, I felt it to be slick and threaded with gently pulsing tendrils. Some of the substance came away with my hand. I could not discern its color in the strange gray light, but it smelled of reeking pus and something faintly chemical. Something stirred ahead, the faintest shifting in the shadows, indiscernible. It lay along my path of escape. Reflexively, I crouched, moving as I would in life to conceal my steps, so this was no longer necessary. As I drew closer, the film along the walls and ceiling thickened, now a resin interlaced with fleshy cords that pulsed arrhythmically. The tunnel through which I traveled sloped down into a circular chamber where many other tunnels met. Here, the alien growth was thickest, and the air was saturated with its sickly odor. Here, I found the awakened. 12 of them stood together in the dark, facing away from me, swaying gently in naked silence. Their bodies were crisscrossed with bulging veins in patterns most unnatural to human circulation. For a moment, I was stricken still and only watched, but the 12 remained as they were, as they had been for who knows how long, hidden beneath our very streets. The tunnel I needed was near to them, though not within their line of sight. I crept across the flesh floor, wholly expecting it to betray me with some unnatural sound, but my movement was utterly silent. Nearer to the awakened, I could smell the same sickness emanating from their bodies. The blood stirred in my legs, urging me to leap, to run, but I suppressed it, moving with utmost caution. Yet though I was soundless, even to my own preternatural hearing, one of the naked bodies spoke.
"He does not dream,"
it said, and all at once they turned to face me with tilted heads and slanted smiles. "Stay back!" I shouted, but they did not. They moved calmly forward, bare feet squishing on the living mat. My eyes darted in the dark, desperately seeking a path unbarred by my assailants, and finding none. The one closest to me, a fleshy woman of perhaps 60 years, reached with upturned palms as if to embrace me, smiling all the while. The blood sprang into my arms, and I cried out as I swung a blow at her head. Their sickness must have rendered them extremely brittle, for to my horror, the woman's head broke in like a rotting pumpkin, tearing free from her body, still wrapped around my hand. This minor inconvenience did little to deter her, as her body still stepped forward, reaching for embrace. From her neck, spindly tendrils erupted, twisting and whipping upward, and from the gaping hole of her throat emanated a deep chittering. I shrieked and lunged away from the others so that my back pressed against the fleshy wall. A strange sensation sank into my hands then. Not quite pain, but a sort of pressure, a heightened awareness of the flesh. I looked down to see the woman's head still attached, gnawing with curved teeth that sprang from where her face ripped open. Her eyes rolled back into her severed head as she gnawed, as if in ecstasy. In a frantic, jerking motion, I was able to tear her from me, but my hands went with her, and as her head struck the ground, the same spindly tendrils that had come from her body erupted like so many legs to carry it quickly away with its prize. Again, there was no pain at the loss of my hand, but I did feel the blood recoil from the mangled wound, closing itself off from that path. I had no time to consider this, for the awakened pressed upon me, surrounding me. Had I passed through the shadow of death only to be destroyed once more by these monstrosities? The blood inside me surged, compelling me to turn upon the wall at my back. This time I heeded its command. I whirled and struck against the diseased growth, driving through it to the stone beneath. The walls there must have been deeply corroded, for the stone broke inward, as if from a great hammer. Through the path that was opened, I fled, not daring to look back, and my flight was of a swiftness unknown to me, even on horseback. The tunnels rushed past in an unintelligible stream of grey, and the air buffeted my face like a storm's wind. I raised my arms to shield my face, for surely I would collide with the walls at such speed, and my flight was halted. I stood in stillness and listened. Only silence. I realized I wasn't breathing, and resumed the process by conscious will. But where was I now? I did not recognize these tunnels. They must have been sealed away over the centuries, forgotten passageways left by our forebears. There were no sounds of rats or insects here, no flow of human filth. Not even the air made any sign of stirring, and the only smell was that of dust upon dust, the earthen scent of layered time. I looked to my hands then, or the hand that remained to me. My left arm now ended in a stump, as if there had never been a hand, nor any wound. There was no pain. I drew a dagger from my coat and pressed its point against my left forearm, gently at first. No pain. I pressed harder, watching the blade pierce my pale flesh, but I felt only a dull pressure. Further still I pushed the blade, until it pierced through the other side of my arm, but still no pain. Inside my arm, the blood diverted its course around the metal, so that when I withdrew it, no blood was spilled, and within seconds, the wound closed itself. The sound of my own voice disrupted my fascination. This was not the time for experiments. Unsure of where to go, other than farther from whence I came, I moved forward with no sense of direction. I stalked the shadows of the hidden passages in silence, not as a living, breathing intruder, but a denizen befitting a tomb. For that is what they were, I soon found. Stretching hallways lined with bone-strewn alcoves, a catacombs. And as I passed the timeless remains, I heard, no, I felt, faint whispers, as if dancing behind my eyes. I could not discern what the voices said, nor what language they used, but I could feel their eyeless gaze upon me, the weight of ancient judgment. The blood within me rippled against this malice, bringing me to a halt, and the whispers deepened. I do not mean to disturb your rest. So the whispers felt as if within my mind I addressed the timeless bones. I am a son of Thacia. In life I served her and failed. In death I seek her vengeance. Hundreds of voiceless words whirled around me, constricting me so that I could not have taken a step if I tried. Please! You must let me pass! Now I began to hear my name among the many whispers, many times. So I had not given it, and the crushing pressure seized my entire form, rendering me unable to speak. I felt them seeping into me then, ancient things, stripped by time of all but furious will. The blood seized in violent resistance, and the whispers pushed back, innumerable, overwhelming. Vertigo consumed me, as if I was tumbling, reeling, plummeting inside myself, deeper and deeper into the darkness of my own mind, and the whispers gripped me even there. Then 2 lights flickered from the blackness of my inner abyss, a pair of eyes that burned as spectral flames within a lantern of desiccated flesh. Deeper chills and death washed over me as I recognized the horrible face. It was the Lich. And as its presence rose, the whispers swarmed in terror, rushing up and out of me in a wailing stream. They fled from me, from their own bones that surrounded me, from the darkness in which they lay for centuries, and the catacombs fell utterly silent. Once more, I could control my limbs. I was freed from the darkness of my inner self, from the spectral eyes that flickered therein, watching, waiting. I moved onward, 13,951 paces by the end. To mortal eyes, I moved in total darkness. To my sight, I moved through a twilight of grey, through an endless hallway lined with endless bones, but no whispers dared rise to meet me. Through many winding passageways I wandered, through splitting tunnels that sloped to darkened depths. I never knew so vast a structure lay beneath Thacia. To whom did it once belong? What secrets lay in those fathomless depths? Those answers would elude me. Always I took any path that inclined upward, ever seeking the surface. When at last I found a winding stairway leading up, I could not help a small laugh at the cruel irony. In many sections, the ancient stairs had crumbled away, leaving vast gaps the length of several men between traversable structures. I moved along the wall, beginning at the base of the stairs until I reached the first gap and stood gazing above to where the stairs continued, higher than a house. Then a thought occurred to me. What would be the harm to me if I were to fall? There was no pain at all when my hand was severed. No pain when punctured by a blade. And it's not as if I'm incapable of feeling pain, for the silver in my laboratory hurt worse to look at than having my hand gnawed off at the wrist. So I can be harmed, but only by some things. Maybe it's the blood. Maybe that's the key. Only that which can harm the blood can harm me. That is why I feel no pain from blade or fang. The blood does not fear them. Since that would mean that, like my movement, neither is my pain driven by physiological process. It is a message from the blood. It is the blood that animates me, that grants me sight and hearing. It is the blood that sustains me, repairs me. This blood, it is me. And all the rest is merely a vessel. And if no harm can come to the blood by falling, then there would be no harm in a simple experiment in this stairwell. I took a few steps back down the stairs, glanced once more to those that lay so far ahead and above. The blood in my legs coiled as I willed myself forward. 3 quick steps, and then I leapt, expecting to come crashing to the ground. And yet I soared through the dark, landing without a sound on the stairs above. Incredible. There is no telling what I am truly capable of now. My instincts, my presuppositions, my habits from life are insufficient to guide me in this state. The only way to know for sure is to experiment. I leapt again and again, ever upward, noiselessly bounding greater lengths than any living thing without wings. And what's more, I was untired by this. My body both lifted itself and landed as if nearly weightless. At the top of the stairwell, I found a metal grate, overgrown with rust. Impassable, I would have said in life. In death, I took hold of it and pulled. The metal groaned in the resistance, unmoved in who knows how many centuries. But more blood surged into my right arm and hand. The grating tore free, and I held it in bewilderment. Was this iron that yielded to me? Surely not. I dropped the grating down the darkness of the stairwell, and with a final soundless leap, rose out of the dead air of the forgotten passages and into the first night of my eternity. From all around, the night called to me. Its many voices coalesced in wordless song, and above them all sprawled the greatest beauty I have beheld in all my years. The stars. Like never before they shone, as scintillating shoals upon the shoreless seas of the night. Had there always been so many of them? By their light alone I saw as clearly as by day. I stood atop a crumbling tower amid a greater ruins. Many such places lie strewn across Malorum, but where was this one? Upon the horizon, distant flames glinted as if a reddish star had fallen from the heavens. It was Thacia. I looked again to the stars. The sign of the seed was rising to the right of the embers of Thacia, which meant I had traveled far to the south. That is when I first smelled it, hot and sweet on the night wind, a scent unlike any I had experienced in life. It poured itself down my throat, and I felt the blood within begin to tremble. My body moved by reflex, but I snapped out of the daze as I realized my legs were taking me straight off the edge of the tower, some 50 feet in the air. As the wind renewed, so did the burning aroma, and my right leg raised, perching my foot on the very edge of the tower. "Let's look for a way down!" I urged the blood, but there's no reasoning with it. Under greater compulsion than that which repelled me from silver, I stepped off the tower, unable to stop myself. Logically, I knew I was unlikely to be harmed, but One does not shake instincts accumulated over 60 years in a single night. I covered my face with my remaining hand, crying out as I fell. No pain. No impact. I lowered my hand to find myself upon the ground, the tower top far overhead. I had landed soundlessly upon my feet without trying, without even looking. As easy as it had been, I still felt great relief for being on the ground once more. Within moments, my legs were moving of their own accord, chasing down the irresistible fragrance. How can I describe it? I can say that it was sweet. Hot, perhaps. Like honeyed wine and spices. But this does not capture it, for it stirred something in me. A yearning, an emptiness only realized in its presence. It was as if I could sense a part of what I was across the distance. Something I had lost and now strove to reclaim. My journey took me to the outskirts of a decimated village. Wooden barricades had been smashed in. Bodies lay half sunken in the mud. Those that had once been living and those that had not. Deadhaus. It had struck this southern village. But why? Further in, I found the sundered remains of a vite's core and stooped over it. Whatever flesh once housed the broken core was nowhere to be seen. A single vite had not been enough to prevent this. The sweet sense roused me to my feet once more. It came from the tavern. The feeble wooden door offered no resistance to my entry. My instincts drew me downward, towards the cellar. As I descended the steps, I found something that halted me, even in the presence of the enthralling aroma. The stairs were slick with fleshy growth, pale pink and streaked with reddish tendrils. The awakened. They were here too, far from Thacia. But how? There had never been reports of this. I was torn between retreating in the face of what might be waiting for me below and the unbearable compulsion of the blood within. In the end, the need was greater by far than fear. I moved down the steps, making no noise, and wondering if that unnatural silence would even matter. What I found was no threat to anything but my senses. An orgy of dismembered limbs and mangled flesh was splattered across the cellar. Whatever the ravaged remains belonged to was utterly unrecognizable. Some of it was burned, reduced to cinder. Some was withered, as if it had been dead for years. I cannot fathom what violence took place in that cellar, but of the awakened there was no sign, except a gentle rattling behind a green door. I steeled myself, remembering that I was not as frail as my instincts told me I was. Whatever lay on the other side of that door, I could outrun it. As I pushed it open, the rattling ceased. A storage room, full of shelves and barrels. The sweet smell was maddeningly thick here. My body took me to it, to one of the barrels in the corner. Its lid was unsealed. Tentatively, I opened the barrel, and the horrible truth was revealed to me. A girl of maybe 12 years huddled inside the barrel, eyes wild with terror. She was the lone survivor of what happened here, clever enough to know to hide, small enough to succeed. I realized I could hear her heart beating, each pulse emanating the hot scent. It was her blood. That is what drew me through the night. The pulse drowned all sound, all thought, suffused my consciousness with indomitable need. The horror. I tried to scream, but as if in a nightmare, no sound escaped me. I sank to my knees, nearer to her, and bowed my head. And for the first time in my life and death, I prayed. Alaric the Damned.